The Prophecies of Sir Winston Churchill. Sir Winston Leonard Spencer-Churchill, 30th of November 1874 to the 24th of January 1965, was a British politician. He was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1940 to 1945, and again from 1951 to 1955. Widely regarded as one of the greatest wartime leaders of the 20th century, Churchill was also an artist, a historian and a writer. He is the only British Prime Minister in history to have received the Nobel Prize in Literature, and was also the first person to be made an honorary citizen of the United States. The Black Dog suffered by Churchill. Matt Haig, Reasons to Stay Alive. Winston Churchill lived with the Black Dog for much of his life. Watching a fire, he once remarked to a young researcher he was employing, "I know why logs spit. I know what it is to be consumed." Indeed he did. He was, in terms of career achievements, one of the most active men who ever lived, yet he continually felt despondent and full of darkness. The political philosopher John Gray believes Churchill didn't overcome depression to become a good war leader, rather that the experience of depression directly enabled him to be one. Gray argues in an article for the BBC that it was Churchill's exceptional openness to intense emotion that explains how he was able to sense dangers that more conventional minds fail to see. For most of the politicians and opinion makers who wanted to appease Hitler, the Nazis were not much more than a raucous expression of German nationalism, writes Gray. It needed an unusual mind to address an unusual threat. He owed his foresight of the horror that was to come to visits of the Black Dog. So, yes, depression is a nightmare, but can it also be a useful one? Can it be one that improves the world in various ways? Depression as a driver of prophetic insight. One could attribute Winston Churchill's prophetic insight to simply a most unusual intellect. But that explanation does not hold water, and if you think about it, it's not really an explanation at all. His paintings are full of colour and light, showing he was artistic and sensitive rather than intellectual or academic. His position was an accident of birth rather than any choice on his part. His aristocratic family and private schooling quite possibly forced him along a path he did not really want. William Manchester, The Last Lion. Winston Spencer-Churchill, Defender of the Realm, 1940 to 1965. In 1932, Churchill's book Thoughts and Adventures was published. In a collection of essays, he predicted the atomic bomb, atomic-powered electrification, and the risks to humanity that came with this, bioengineering of crops and animals, and television, which when it became a reality, he detested. All of these in their own way have posed a threat, and it was quite possibly the very low emotional state that he plunged to that helped him see or prophesy their emergence, the dark pattern of the great work that, if used, could drive humanity to its own extinction. See the video of the loom. Career and responsibilities. Churchill was born into an aristocratic family as the grandson of the 7th Duke of Marlborough, and it is clear that at no time was he allowed to avoid those responsibilities. As a young army officer, he saw action in British India, the Sudan, and the Second Boer War, where he was held prisoner but escaped. He was at the forefront of politics for 50 years, holding many political and cabinet positions. Before the First World War, he served as President of the Board of Trade, Home Secretary, and First Lord of the Admiralty. During the war, he continued as First Lord of the Admiralty until a disastrous Gallipoli campaign. He resumed active army service on the Western Front as commander of the 6th Battalion of the Royal Scots Fusiliers. He's the one not smiling. He returned to government as Minister of Munitions, Secretary of State for War, and Secretary of State for Air. After the war, Churchill served as Chancellor of the Exchequer in the Conservative or Baldwin government of 1924 to 29. But it was only when he was out of office and politically in the wilderness during the 1930s, with the burden removed, that Churchill took the lead in warning about Nazi Germany. And he campaigned for rearmament. Following the resignation of Neville Chamberlain on the 10th of May 1940, Churchill became Prime Minister. His steadfast refusal to consider defeat, surrender, or a compromise peace helped inspire British resistance, especially during the difficult early days of the war when civilians were targeted in Hitler's London bombings of ordinary people's houses and businesses. Even churches. When Britain stood alone among European countries in its active opposition to Adolf Hitler, but this time it was not prophecies that flooded his mind, but speeches and radio broadcasts which helped inspire the British people. He led Britain as Prime Minister until victory over Nazi Germany had been secured. Although much of Britain lay in ruins from the German bombs, he retired in 1955. Upon his death, Elizabeth II granted him the honour of a state funeral, which saw one of the largest assemblies of world statesmen in history. He was named the greatest Briton of all time in a 2002 poll. Prophecies about science and the future of mankind. All spirit input, whether prophecy, inspiration, wisdom, requires both a mind capable of receiving the input and the intellect or imagination to interpret what is being received. Perhaps, therefore, the most startling prophecy Churchill made was concerning the role of science. And at the time of making this video, the final part to this prophecy has not been played out. But the way he phrases the prophecy implies we always have a choice, that there are actually always two forks to the path. And one leads to misery and the destruction of mankind, and the other to a kinder, more merciful, God-fearing future. Mr. Winston Churchill, Thoughts and Adventures. Projects undreamed of by past generations will absorb our immediate descendants. Forces, terrific and devastating, will be in their hands. Comforts, activities, amenities, pleasures will crowd upon them, but their hearts will ache, their lives will be barren, if they have not a vision above material things. And with the hopes and powers will come dangers out of all proportion to the growth of man's intellect, to the strength of his character, or the efficacy of his institutions. Once more, the choice is offered between blessing and cursing. Never was the answer that will be given harder to foretell. Without an equal growth of mercy, pity, peace and love, science herself may destroy all that makes human life majestic and tolerable. There never was a time when the inherent virtues of human beings required more strong and confident expression in daily life. There never was a time when the hope of immortality and the disdain of earthly powers and achievements were more necessary for the safety of the children of men. Among the Romans not a bird without a prophecy was heard. Fortunes of an empire often hung on the magician's magpie's tongue, and every crow was to the state a sure interpreter of fate.